The Africa 2017 Business Forum entered its second day on Friday in the Egyptian resort city of Sharm el Sheikh. Lovely place. The forum has brought together top officials and businessmen and even politicians to discuss promoting economic cooperation between African states. Right now, though, let's focus our attention on Uche Okoronkwo. She's been focusing, of course, on the developments over there in that particular conference. Uche, I understand quite a few deals were actually announced at the conference today. Walk us through what happened.
Well, Rama, quite a lot of discussion today, acknowledging that 2017 has been quite a transitional year for a number of Africa's governments. Of course, we've seen Egypt coming out of a recession due to those IMF reforms kicking in. Nigeria also coming out of a recession. South Africa sort of regaining its political and economic footing. Commodity prices such as oil also holding off. So acknowledging that there's certainly an improved outlook in terms of capital market investments and strategic investments on the African continent. Now, interesting statistics coming out today. McKinsey announced the fact that Africa's consumer market is changing. We're seeing consumer spending, it's going to grow by about 38% per year up to 2025. They also said business spending is expected to move from about 2.6 trillion US dollars in 2015 to about 3.5 trillion US dollars, of course, in 2025. So certainly an improved outlook and improved environment for intra-Africa investments going forward. Now, of course, a number of deals taking place on the sidelines of this event. We saw the Africa Export-Import Bank signed a deal with Egypt's Development Bank, and basically they're providing about $500 million to Egyptian businesses to support Egyptian businesses who basically want to export and of course support intra-Africa trade moving forward. Now, interestingly, we did sit down with one of Africa's top businesswomen, Isabel dos Santos. She's also one of Africa's richest women and the chairman of Unitel. And we asked her about her views on cross-border collaboration in Africa and certainly Angola's economy as well. Here's what she had to say.
If you look back 2 decades ago, 20 years ago, we didn't have African business symbols. And nowadays, you see that it's being recognized that each country has investors and has strong key players in their economies. And a lot of these key players in their economies are not just now playing within their own countries, but also going cross-border to other African countries and establishing networks that are not just running from their own country of origin, but also in other African cities, and really looking at more of a African play. And this is very new. I think this is very, very forward.
Now, having been a key player in Angola's oil and gas sector, what lessons do you think Africa can learn, especially after that shake-up in commodity prices?
Well, I came into the oil sector through the eyes of NOC, so a public state-run company. And state-run companies and public companies have a very peculiar working environment because but they also look at the social economic benefit that they generate into their economies. And in the particular case of Sonangol, definitely being the holder of the national rights, the concessionaire of the national oil rights, it was something very central to the company. So public companies and private companies are run slightly differently. When we look at IOCs, they're much more focused on profitability, on having efficient management, on really looking at the best opportunities on which to invest. And sometimes we don't have the same alignment between a private company and a public company, where in a public company, the priorities can be sometimes regional development or strategic development or providing employment in certain areas. So a lot more aligned with political issues as well. But in terms of oil sector, I think that the oil sector and the oil opportunities, and you asked me, can we do more and can we do better? And the answer is yes. We can definitely do more and better. And this will take by us being a lot more rigorous on the way we invest. So as governments or as holders of any kind of stakeholders in the oil sector, really looking at the oil investments and studying the opportunities better before we put in our money. So recognizing the better opportunities, smaller investments, faster returns, smaller risks to make us more resilient and then grow these opportunities.
Of course, Angola is going through some major reforms in its oil and gas sector. What is your take on how that is going to change the landscape of the industry?
Governments and good governance are key, because they really create the microeconomic environment, and we need that microeconomic environment to work. So issues of budget, really planning carefully the budget, recognizing where investment in infrastructure is needed. Because sometimes what happens is that we will invest in infrastructure, but are we putting that infrastructure in the right place? Are we putting that infrastructure close to employment, close to where the business community needs that infrastructure to be? So really having a more alignment between government and business is essential. And when government is driving policy, it has to make policy that makes sense. In terms of government policy is key to create a macroeconomic environment. And having a close dialogue between the government and the business community is really very important.
Now, of course, tomorrow is going to be China Day here at the conference, and we'll see them discussing around the role of special economic zones in Africa's industrial revolution, and certainly what we can learn from China moving forward. Back to you in the studio, Rama.
Indeed, some pretty interesting content from the team over in Sharm el Sheikh. Expect a lot more content to come through from Ucho Koronko in the next 24 hours.